Discipline was never supposed to make people comfortable around you. If it does, you're doing it wrong. The version of you that Machiavelli would call dangerous doesn't wake up at 5, doesn't drink less, doesn't post a transformation photo. He's simply impossible to predict, impossible to pressure, and impossible to read. 6 strategies separate that man from the one sitting here right now. And every one of them will cost you something you currently think you can't live without. If you're honest with yourself over the next half hour, you'll recognize yourself in at least 3 of them, and by the end, you'll wish you hadn't. Not because the truth is cruel, because it's simple, and simple truths are always the hardest ones to keep pretending you haven't heard. He didn't write for saints, and he didn't write for optimists. He wrote for men who had already lost everything once, and had no intention of losing it twice. Removed from power, accused of a conspiracy he had no real part in, held under suspicion long enough to understand exactly what desperate men do the moment they think no one is watching. He came out the other side asking a question most people are too comfortable to ask out loud. Why do some men become impossible to remove, while others are discarded the instant they stop being useful? It wasn't talent. It wasn't luck. It wasn't even intelligence, not primarily. It was what a man does with himself when nobody is measuring him. The private discipline that never makes it into the story people tell about him, right up until the day it's the only thing left standing between and ruin. He watched cities change hands not because one army was stronger than another, but because the men defending them had spent years being soft in private while performing strength in public. And the gap between the performance and reality was exactly where they collapsed the moment real pressure arrived. That's the part almost nobody quotes back, because it's less flattering than the version people prefer to remember him by. Everything that follows comes from that single observation, sharpened 400 years later for a life you're actually living in, not a court you'll never rule. Here's the first one, and it's the one that hides best, because it wears the mask of confidence. You finish a hard workout, and before the sweat's dry, you've already told someone. You land on a new plan, a business, a body, a version of yourself you're actually proud of. And within the hour, it's a story you've told 3 separate people, maybe with a photo attached. It feels momentum. It feels like accountability. It feels, if you're honest, like relief. And that relief is the entire problem hiding in plain sight. The moment someone nods and says, "That's awesome, good for you," your brain quietly closes the loop right there. It got the reward it was chasing without doing a single hour of the work that was supposed to earn it. You didn't anyone. You just let your nervous system collect payment early. This is the trap of performed intention. Announcing plans dressed up as confidence and accountability when underneath it's a search for permission and applause you haven't actually earned yet. Cashed in before the work exists to back it up. Picture the version of this plays out over and over in your own life. A new routine starts on a Monday, gets announced in the group chat by Tuesday, and by the second week the only thing that survived is the group chat message itself, still sitting there unedited, a monument to an intention nobody followed through on. Nobody's laughing at you for it. That's what makes it worse. The silence afterward is its own kind of proof, and it doesn't stay contained to one habit. It pounds every time you cache the applause in advance. The next intention needs a slightly bigger announcement to produce the same feeling, the same way a joke needs a bigger crowd the second time to land the way it did the first. Within a year, you're not a man with unfinished projects anymore. You're a man with an audience trained to expect announcements and nothing else. And on some level, they've already being surprised when nothing follows. They've stopped asking how the plan is going, not out of politeness, but because some part of them already knows the answer, and has decided it isn't worth the awkwardness of hearing it out loud again. Somewhere, right now, a version of you is doing the exact opposite, and he's not doing it because he's stronger than you. He's doing it because he removed the shortcut entirely. He finishes the workout and says nothing. He builds the business for 4 straight months before a single person outside his own household knows it exists. When people finally notice, they don't hear an announcement. They see a result standing in front of them, and there's no argument against a result. You can doubt a plan, you can't doubt a thing that already happened. There's a reason for the gap between these two men, and it isn't mysterious. Research on goal disclosure has repeatedly found that people who tell others about an intention are measurably less likely to actually complete it, because the mind treats being seen as trying almost the same way it treats succeeding. You are trading the real reward for a cheaper, faster one, and you don't even feel the theft happening in real time. Machiavelli understood a version of this centuries before any lab could prove it. He warned that a ruler's real power rests on what people perceive, not on what's actually true. And the instant you perform an intention out loud, you've handed away the one advantage that was still entirely yours. Surprise. Nobody can prepare for a man they don't know is coming. So before you speak your next plan into a room, ask yourself the only question that matters. Are you building it, or are you just trying to feel for 5 minutes, like you already have? There's a version of this trap that's even more dangerous than talking too much, and it's talking to the right people at the wrong time. Telling your mentor before you've earned the update. Telling the person you're trying to impress before there's anything to actually be impressed by. You tell yourself it's networking, it's transparency, it's building the relationship early. Sometimes it is. More often it's the exact same theft wearing a nicer suit. Spending the credibility before you've built the thing that was supposed to fund it. Picture 2 men in the exact same situation. Both just got rejected from something they wanted badly. A deal, a relationship, a place they worked hard to earn. The first one needs to talk about it before he can move again. He needs someone to tell him it wasn't his fault. Needs the reassurance, needs the warmth of being understood. And only after he's collected enough of that warmth does he even consider doing anything else that day. The second man says nothing. He goes back to work, same night. Not because he doesn't feel it. He feels every bit of it, maybe more than the first man does. But because he decided a long time ago that his feelings don't get a vote on what happens next. That second man is the version of you this section is training you to become. And here's what you've actually been doing instead, if you're honest. Treating your mood like a manager who has to sign off on your effort before you're allowed to give it. Too tired, skip the session. Not feeling it, push the deadline a day. Heartbroken, put the goals on pause just for now. Frustrated with a coworker, let the tone of the whole week shift around that one bad conversation. That's the flip. You thought you were already the disciplined one in this story. You're not. You're the first man, quietly wearing the second man's reputation, and the two of you have never once stood in the same room. Prove which one is real. That, just for now, has a cost, and it is not abstract. Momentum, once broken by an emotional exemption, takes really 3 weeks to rebuild for every single week you let a feeling run the schedule. That's the pattern across most habit disruption research, and it lines up with what you already know from experience. The hardest workout of the year is never the first one. It's the first one back after a break you gave yourself permission to take. You're not resting when you do this. You're negotiating with a version of yourself who will always, without fail, find a new reason to negotiate again tomorrow, because you just proved to him that the negotiation works every time he asks. Machiavelli didn't believe emotion should be erased. He believed a ruler had to understand fear and love well enough to use them deliberately, never be ruled by them on instinct. That principle doesn't stop at how you treat other people. It starts with how you treat yourself in the 15 seconds after something goes wrong, before you've decided anything at all yet. The next time a feeling shows up demanding a vote, let it speak. Let it say whatever it needs to say. And then let your hands move anyway, because that's the only sentence in this entire section that actually matters. Think back to the last time you actually respected someone for how they handled a bad week. It was never because they announced how hard it was. It was because you found out about the difficulty afterward, almost by accident, buried inside a result they'd already produced despite it. That's the entire difference between a man ruled by his emotions and a man who simply carries them while he works. One of them needs an audience to witness the struggle. The other only needs the outcome to speak for itself. Why do you keep asking permission for things you were already allowed to just do? You ask your friends if the plan sounds crazy. You run the decision by 4 or 5 people before committing to it, not because their opinion changes a single fact on the ground, but because their approval softens the fear of being wrong alone. This is the trap of humility. Checking in disguised as staying grounded, as being a team player, as not getting ahead of yourself, when really it's outsourcing your spine to a committee that has nothing at stake in the outcome either way. Every time you do it, you hand a stranger a vote on your own life that they never earned the right to cast. And worse, you do it so quietly you don't even register it as a decision. It feels like due diligence, like being responsible, like the mature move. Think about the last genuinely good decision you made in your life. Chances are it wasn't the one that survived a group vote. It was the one you made quietly and only explained afterward, once it had already worked. The decisions that die in committee rarely die because they were bad. They die because they needed unanimous comfort to survive. And good decisions almost never come pre-approved by everyone in the room. It costs than you think. Ask 10 people for their honest opinion on a bold decision, and on average 7 of them will hand you back a version of course shaped entirely by their own fear of failure, not by anything specific to your situation. You're not gathering wisdom in that moment. You're collecting permission slips signed by people who will not live with a single consequence either way, win or lose. Machiavelli wrote that a wise man relies chiefly on what is within his own control, not on what depends on others, because anything that requires someone else's approval to move forward can be taken from you the instant they decide to withhold it. That's not paranoia. That's simply what happened to him more than once in exactly that order. The version of you that scares people doesn't ask a room whether the plan sounds crazy. He tells the room what he's already finished building and watches their expression change in real time. Notice how differently people treat the 2 announcements. "I'm thinking about doing this. What do you all think?" invites a committee, and a committee will always find a reason to slow you down, because caution costs them nothing. "I did this" invites something else entirely. Respect, curiosity, sometimes even quiet envy. But never a vote, because the vote already happened, and you were the only one in the room. The first 3 cost you opportunities. A launch delayed, a habit restarted from zero, a decision quietly outsourced to someone who never deserved the vote in the first place. The next 3 cost you something you can't simply rebuild next quarter. They cost you the person you were supposed to become. Nobody tells you exactly when that trade happens. There's no ceremony, no single decision you can point back to later and say, "That's where I chose comfort over becoming him." It happens in 1,000 small surrenders, each one too minor to feel like betrayal in the moment. And that's precisely what makes the next 3 strategies more dangerous than the first 3. The first half of this video cost you time. The second half costs you the man on the other side of that time. You call it self-care. You've earned the day off, the extra hour in bed, the version of balance that somehow every single time, lands on the side of doing less rather than more. Here's the uncomfortable truth, and it's the only time this script is going to hand it to you directly. Comfort doesn't announce itself as weakness. It announces itself as wisdom. That's exactly why it wins so often. It never feels like the enemy while it's winning. It feels like the reasonable choice a mature adult makes for himself. You tell yourself you'll start Monday with fresh energy, and Monday quietly becomes the Monday after that, and somewhere inside that stretch, without a single dramatic moment marking it, a full season of your one lightly expires while you were waiting to feel ready. It shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. The phone call you keep meaning to make, the hard conversation you keep finding the right time, the version of your finances you keep meaning to actually look at instead of glancing past. None of these individually feel like collapse. That's exactly the design. Somewhere, someone else took that exact week. The hard one, the one that felt unreasonable to push through, and did it anyway, not because he had access to more motivation than you, but because he had already stopped waiting for motivation to show up before he started moving. 18 months later, the gap between the two of you isn't a mood anymore. It's a body. It's bank balance. It's a body of finished work standing in a room that only one of you has any claim to, for the exact same 18 months spent by both. Machiavelli warned that a ruler destroyed by comfort almost never sees it coming, because comfort disguises itself as security right up until the moment the walls actually come down around him. And by then, it's not a lesson anymore, it's a funeral. Ask yourself, honestly, which Monday you're actually planning to become the version of you who finally starts, and how many Mondays you've already spent on that same promise. There's a particular kind of silence that shows up around men who've done this to themselves for years without noticing. It's not sadness exactly. It's the quiet, ground hum of a running slightly below its own capacity, all the time, in every direction at once. The workouts that get shortened, the calls that get postponed, the version of the week that technically counts as fine, but never once gets close to what was actually possible. Nobody stages an intervention for a life that's merely comfortable. That's exactly why it's the trap almost nobody escapes. Somewhere, someone built an entire identity on being the reliable one, and it quietly became the exact reason nobody respects him the way he expected to eventually be respected. He's available for every favor, every last-minute plan, every person who needs a ride, an ear, or a loan he genuinely can't afford to give. People call him such a good guy behind his back and to his face, and slowly his calendar stops belonging to him. Every open evening filled before he even gets a say in filling it himself. Every quick favor arriving with the quiet assumption that of course he'll say yes, because he always has. Here's what you've actually been doing. Instead of noticing the trap closing in around you, mistaking being needed for being valued. They are not the same thing. And the difference only shows up the moment you actually need something back and discover how few people rearrange their day for you the way you rearranged yours, without hesitation. A man who is available to everyone has, without ever saying it out loud, taught the world he has no price, no limit, and no life of his own that outranks their convenience. That predictability is precisely what makes him easy to manage and easy to overlook for anything that actually matters. The promotion, the real loyalty, the invitation to the table, where decisions get made instead of just executed by someone else. The unpredictable version of you, the one who says no without explaining why, who disappears for stretches of time and reappears when it serves the mission, becomes the one people start quietly reorganizing their own behavior around, without ever admitting out loud that's what they're doing. Machiavelli warned that a ruler too easily read becomes a ruler too easily managed. Predictability isn't kindness, it's a leash, and you're the one who handed it over, one small yes at a time, over years. Stop available. Start being chosen. Watch what happens the first time you say no to something you'd normally absorb without thinking. There's a brief, uncomfortable silence. The other person recalibrating, realizing the automatic yes isn't automatic anymore. Some of them will be annoyed. A few will even say something about it out loud. But the ones worth keeping around will adjust within a week, and they'll start asking instead of assuming, which was the entire point all along. What if the thing you're most proud of about yourself is the exact thing keeping you small? You call it loyalty to who you are. The identity you built years ago, the funny one, the reliable one, the guy who doesn't take things too seriously, still gets defended every single time someone suggests you've changed, even in the moments when changing is precisely what the situation requires of you. This is the final trap, and it disguises itself the best of all six because it wears the mask of integrity. Refusing to update who you are because doing feels like betraying who you used to be, as if the 18-year-old version of you signed a contract the current version is somehow still legally bound to honor for life. You'll walk into rooms full of people who've never met the old version of you at all, and still perform him anyway, out of pure habit, because he's the only character you've ever rehearsed. Somewhere, a version of you let that old identity die on purpose, deliberately, without ceremony. He stopped performing the old jokes. He stopped defending the old habits when people brought them up looking for the old reaction. He stopped needing people from 5 years ago to still recognize him on sight. And within a year he was unrecognizable in every way that actually mattered. Not because he lied about who he was, but because he finally refused to let a filed sketch of himself keep making decisions for the man standing here now. Machiavelli, that conflict cannot always be avoided, only postponed, and always to someone else's advantage. And the war you keep postponing against your own old identity is a war your future self is quietly losing every single day you refuse to fight it. The old you doesn't need your loyalty. He needs a funeral, and you're the only one who can give him one. This is usually the moment old friendships quietly fracture. And it's worth saying plainly, some of them are supposed to, not out of cruelty, and not because the other person did anything wrong. Simply because a friendship built entirely around an old version of you has no actual mechanism for surviving a real one. The friendships that matter will find their footing again on new terms. The rest were never really about you to begin with. They were about the character you used to play. There's an irony almost nobody learns about the man this entire framework is borrowed from. Machiavelli didn't write his ideas from inside a palace. He wrote them after being removed from power, interrogated under suspicion of conspiracy, and exiled to a small family farm outside Florence, where he spent his final years writing letters to men who mattered, men who no longer bothered writing back, quietly hoping for a government post he was never given again. He understood every principle in this video before you did tonight. Silence, detachment, isolation, unpredictability, standards, reinvention, and understanding it was not enough to save him from watching from the outside, while smaller, softer men kept the seats he'd once held. That's the part that never makes it onto the version of this story like to tell. He wrote the very book you're hearing paraphrased right now in an attempt to win his old position back, a job application 400 years ahead of its time, and it still wasn't enough. Knowledge without execution isn't wisdom. It's just a longer, better informed way of losing, dressed up well enough that it takes years to notice the difference. None of the 6 strategies above survive contact with tomorrow morning unless something concrete anchors them tonight. Here's what none of this becomes without the follow-through, so take these tonight, not someday when it's convenient. First, Run a 24-hour silence audit. For one full day, execute without announcing a single plan to anyone, out loud or online. Notice how many times your reaches for your phone to tell someone what you're about to do, and don't let it finish the motion. Treat every one of those urges as data about how much of your effort has been running on borrowed applause. Second, install a hard 10-second pause before any emotional reaction gets to make a decision on your behalf. Not to suppress what you're feeling, just to separate the feeling from the next move. Long enough for the right one to win instead of the loudest one. Most bad decisions are made in the first 3 seconds, not the 10th. Third, pick exactly one commitment this week that exists purely to keep someone else comfortable at your expense, and cancel it without attaching an explanation to the cancellation. Watch carefully what happens to how people treat you in the days right after. That reaction will tell you more about the relationship than months of politeness ever did. Discipline was never supposed to make people comfortable around you. If it's starting to, that's not a warning sign. That's the strategy working exactly the way it was built to work. You didn't come here for 6 tips to try out for a week and quietly abandon. You came here because some part of you already suspected that the version of yourself everyone finds easy to be around might be the exact version that's been quietly costing you the most for years without ever presenting you with a bill. This channel isn't going to make that easier to hear the next time either. It's going to keep saying it anyway, whether or not you're ready to listen this time. Because the men who actually change were never the ones waiting to feel ready in the first place. 6 strategies. Silence over performance. Duty over mood. Self-reliance over permission. Standards over comfort. Unpredictability over approval. Reinvention over loyalty to a version of you that already served its purpose. None of them are complicated. All of them are uncomfortable, which is exactly why so few people ever actually run them, and exactly why the ones who do become impossible to ignore.